Thank you. My name is Prakash Venkataraman. I work with Fred Kofman at LinkedIn, like the rest of us. And what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is some of the underlying philosophy that Fred's been pioneering around conscious business and how we actually operationalize that at LinkedIn. Now, I should mention that if you see me darting off stage, it is likely because my lovely wife is pregnant with our baby to be due on Tuesday, so that means I gotta go. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Fred.
Okay. Do you have a phone? How would you know?
She's in the
She's here. I'm not going to say who she is because people are going to look at
but
her.
if she starts
does a
waving.
little wave. I know.
Okay. All right. What a pleasure to be here. And the plan is for me to share with you 5-10 minutes some of the basic principles of what we've tried to implement at LinkedIn and how we've tried to implement it. And then my colleagues here will have been the customers, so to speak, the people that actually do the business in LinkedIn that have put it in practice, and they will share their experience, and then we'll open it up and take some questions and hopefully have some interaction. It's a large room. There's not much opportunity for us to have a big dialogue, but at least to take some of your questions and hopefully attend to them. The sad news is that what tastes good is not always good. And what is good doesn't always taste good. So the problem is that eating mindlessly will get you in trouble. We don't eat by taste. If we ate by taste, bad things would happen to us. So in a sense, to eat mindfully, we have to go against the grains of our, I would say, evolution. In Darwinian terms, those who chose the right foods 1,000 years ago starved to death when there was a famine. And those that chose the sugar and fat were able to save enough during the times of plenty to withstand the times of famine. So we are the offspring of fat genes. And that's why we are driven to eat sugar and fat. And if we keep doing what our genes have been programmed to do 1,000 years ago, now that the food is plentiful all the time, we get into a lot of trouble. So we need to eat consciously. And I want to use the example of eating because it's so basic, it's so obvious. No, it's not otherworldly, it's not metaphysical. There's something called conscious eating. And conscious eating is you eat stuff that is going to produce the result you want instead of stuff that feels good in the moment, but if you think about it, it's not going to be good for you. It's not very metaphysical, it's pretty basic. So what does it mean to eat consciously? Well, you want health, you don't want taste. I mean, hopefully we can get both, but our primary objective is not to enjoy the moment, but to enjoy a long, healthy, and constructive life. Also, we have nutritional principles. We don't eat just based on what we think, but there's a science. There's a rational set of principles that explain to us why some foods interact with our body in constructive ways and some foods don't do so well with us. And then we have to make choices. We have to use our choice-making power, our will, to decide what we're going to put on the table and what we're going to leave like a nice idea and have it occasionally, but not all the time. So let me just say, that's conscious eating. Now, what is conscious business? So for us, conscious business is simply to say, what we really want is to be happy. And the one way to be happy is to have material success. And it's all right, there's no problem. It's actually a pretty good way to produce happiness. And if you don't have enough, seriously not have enough material goods or money, it's very hard to be happy. But material wealth is more a hygiene factor rather than a direct correlation to happiness. If you don't have enough, you're in trouble, but if you have enough, having a lot more won't really bring happiness. So if we say we want to be conscious of what we want to produce in our life, it's like saying taste is good, it's nice to be happy. I feel happy eating chocolate and eating, sugar and fat, but there's something more than just the happiness of the moment. So conscious business, we'll say, has a noble purpose. Conscious business has a purpose of producing happiness in the long term through service. Also, conscious business follows some ethical principles. Just like there are nutritional principles, there are ethical principles about what is a good life, what is a virtuous life. And they are not your opinion or my opinion. There are actually a lot of research, particularly in positive psychology, about what contributes to a human life being happy and what not. And also, conscious business demands some powerful choices, because what feels good is not always good. Like yelling at other people, especially if they disagree with us, feels really good. Telling them they're wrong feels really good. Listening to them, considering what they say, doesn't feel so good, but it is good in the long term. So this is the paradox. Most of the things that we have been evolutionarily designed to do, because they've been useful in the past, today are counterproductive. And if we just keep doing them, we get in trouble. So we have to transform unconditional drive, unconscious drives, which are rooted in us. They come from our history, genetic history as a species, into conscious choices. That's the idea. We want to take whatever comes and honor it, accept it, but then not surrender to it, but actually transform it. And there are, I'm going to say, 12 essential transformations. It's an arbitrary number. I could pick 5. I'm just going to choose 12. And I'll go through them really quickly. I'll give you all the material afterwards if you'd like to know more how they relate to positive psychology, mindfulness, and business. There's plenty of material, and I'll share it with you afterwards. The first one is our natural temptation to blame external things for bad things that happen to us. We want to be victims. So the first transformation is from blaming to owning, saying whatever happens to me, I'm around. So it's not that I produced it, but I contribute to create the reality in which I exist. So as an owner, I'm responsible. I'm responsible in the sense of able to respond. Not responsible like it's my fault, but I'm responsible for my choice in the face of what I do. We call that being a player. So instead of being a victim, taking responsibility. The second transformation is from winning, the desire to win that we all have, to meaning. And that's very different. You don't need to win to mean something. In fact, most of the most meaningful things that happen in life happen when we don't win. So being able to take challenges with poise and seeking to be heroic is one of the transformations. Instead of seeking to be the winner, is seeking to be heroic in the sense of moral heroism, ethical heroism, taking a stand, demonstrating what's right. And that requires, again, a conscious choice. The next is from knowing to learning, because we all got brownie points for knowing things. Nobody goes to school and raises their hand and says, oh, I have a great opportunity to learn because I don't know. No, when I raised my hand was to show I know. So we grow up and we still show we know. We tell people, look, I know this, I know this, I know this. And when we don't know, we try to pretend we know. So learning, it's a conscious choice. And that's what we say, humility. So being humble is opening up to receiving different perspectives, different ideas from the outside, and recognizing that I don't know it all. I know some things, but other people know things as well. And that's part of the next transformation, which is going from judging other people and undermining them with our judgments to understanding them. So we call this being compassionate, walking in the other person's moccasins. We're not trying to evaluate them from outside, but actually experiencing from inside what may be the case from that point of view, and then relating to them in a compassionate way, trying to find how other people are right, not how they're wrong. The next one is from avoiding to confronting. Nobody likes to confront painful facts. In business, it's very obvious that we have a temptation. Just like our desire to eat sugar and fat, we have a temptation to not look at the parts that are disagreeable to us. So say that courage is the opposite. So instead of putting your head in the sand, just look out. Be alert and confront whatever comes. Just Take a look at it and face it. The next one is from pleasing other people to actually truth-telling. And we ask people to be real, to be honest, to be real, to speak your truth. It's so hard when I know that I'm going to say something that may upset you, and I don't know if that upset will create difficult for our relationship, that I tend to compromise. I have a temptation to compromise and not speak my truth. And then I lose myself and I lose the relationship. I mean, it happens all the time, and I've experienced it thousands of times in my life. Next time that I'm going to say something that's scary, I don't want to say it. And I try to please the other person, easing in or some kind of diffusing it. And I know, absolutely know, I'm going to fall into that hole. It's like I'm walking down the street, I see the hole. There's a poem. I'm walking down the street, I see the hole, I fall in it. It's familiar. I like it. So I never get out of this hole because I feel good falling in the hole. That's what I've been doing all my life. So consciousness simply means I see the hole and I walk around it, and that's it. It's not this magical thing. So the next one is from controlling other people to considering them. It feels so good to tell people what to do. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it. Ice cream is nothing compared to telling people what to do. The pleasure of telling you what to do and that was wrong and judging you. So instead of that, we say, try respecting people. Consider them and be respectful. Totally different perspective. The other is taking. When we negotiate, our impulse is to say, how much can I take? And it's to assume that things are a zero-sum game. And one of the things we develop as a discipline is going from taking to making. It's not about taking things, but making things together, using the ingredients. There's something we call going from the dining room conversation, that is kind of a potluck where everybody brings the everybody brings the food and you choose what to eat or not, to a kitchen conversation where we go and cook together. We don't bring the final product, we bring the ingredients, your ideas, my ideas, we mix them up, and hopefully we make a bigger pie, or we make things that we like more than the pie. The next one is from defaulting to delivering. We are so unconscious about promises. It seems crazy, but we say, yes, I'll do it, and then we don't. And we think, oh, priorities changed. And we have all these excuses and explanations, but we give our word, and over we dishonor the word. It's incredible. So the notion is to be absolutely accountable for honoring commitments. Different than delivering. It's not possible to always deliver, but it's possible to always honor commitments. The other transformation is from indulging to investing. Immediate gratification is the order of business for everybody. We want what we want, and we want it right now. Investing has more to do with having a long-term view. And some of you may have heard the story that Daniel Goleman tells in Emotional Intelligence about the children that eat the marshmallow or not eat the marshmallow, and the ones that can wait to eat the marshmallow have a tremendous difference in their ability to be successful and happy in life. So developing the discipline to have a long-term view and not fall into the temptation in the moment is essential. The other is the natural temptation to comply and not to focus on commitment. So most of us are used to living in organizations that seek compliance, we offer compliance, and we don't really commit. We do it because that's what the boss said, or what's the rule, that's the rule, but we don't really feel passionate about what we do. And passion is not something that comes from the outside. It's like happiness or mindfulness. You don't get it from the outside. It's a state of mind. So choosing what to do in a way that makes you passionate. This is related to the difference between bossing and leading. Bossing is using sticks and carrots, rewards and punishments. I use the example with my kids. When I boss my kids, I want them to read. I say, if you don't read, I'll take your iPad away. If you read, I'll give you $10. Okay, that's the reward and punishment approach. And I can make them read. In fact, I don't even have to give them $10. Just threatening them to take their iPhones or iPads away, it's enough. But when you're leading, I don't want my kids to read. I want them to want to read. And that's very different. I can't make them want to read by taking away their iPads, Because they lie. Of course, they say, yes, Daddy, I want to read. And then once I give them the iPad, they go, laugh behind my back, saying, I hate reading, but I have to tell Dad that I like it, so he gives me back my iPad. So bossing is easy. Leading is hard. And inspiring people is really what differentiates a boss from a leader. So these 12 things, I know I went through them really quickly. It's more a poetic invitation rather than a very scientific talk. They create, as we call it, value through values. We want to produce value, but not in any particular way. We want to produce value in a way that creates both material success and happiness. So to finish with a pithy statement, we believe you don't need to sell out to be successful. And you don't need to drop out to be happy. And the idea of conscious business is to create a place where you can be yourself and have both. The way we do it in LinkedIn is to create a platform with all this content online. That was one of the, for you who were in this conference last year, I was with Jeff Weiner, the CEO, and Jeff and I discussed how to bring conscious business to LinkedIn. We talked about that in our keynote last year, but part of the deal was that after we did this for LinkedIn, we'd make it available to the public. And this is cbalinkedin.com, Conscious Business Academy. This is the same course, but expanded, that we use in LinkedIn, available to the public. We're introducing today the possibility of signing up and getting a certification and doing the same program that the people at LinkedIn do, and my colleagues will talk about. So now it's free, it's available, it's in the LinkedIn platform. You just write that, and if you do it you can do it on your own, but if you do it in an organized way, we simply ask you to, the requirement is that you share what you learn with other people. That's it, so it's very, very easy. And if you do that, we'll have a certification that you can put in your LinkedIn profile and all that. But we'll talk more about that later. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. We spend a lot of time on this, and this is the vision we want to see for the world. And I hope I'm not the only one here, but I know I struggle with two seemingly opposing forces. One being, I really want to have a drive and be successful in my career. I also want to be a great husband and hopefully one day a good father and a good son. And I want to excel at everything I could possibly do. On the other hand, I want to be less stressed. I want to not be tethered to my device all the time. I want to be more in tune with family and friends. Please tell me if others are out there that actually. All right, good. I'm not alone. But it's a lot of these things are hard to do. But conscious business, I think, really gives us the framework with which to be able to try and operationalize this. But I'm actually curious for the others here who are actually running businesses. I'd love to know from you. You have busy schedules. There are very few things that take your time, and those things have to be very valuable. Why choose to incorporate conscious business in your work and your life? And if you can give a brief intro of yourself and answer that, we'd love to know. Mike, could we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Derezin, and just a quick background. I've been an entrepreneur most of my career, and I've now been at LinkedIn 6 years, and I helped build a business at LinkedIn called Sales Solutions, which brings the best of LinkedIn to sales organizations. So in regards to my story of conscious business, the first thing I'd say is you also ruined my dinner when I saw those pictures of food. So, we're planning on doing pizza tonight, and now I have some questions about that. So I'll make new plans. But I think for me, the conscious business was, the way I got involved was we were fortunate enough to have Fred get involved and start advising and coaching at LinkedIn. And you start hearing some of his principles and some of the wisdom that he had, and I just got more and more engaged. And Fred also had a big influence on our CEO, and Fred mentioned how our CEO was actually here with Fred at Wisdom 2.0 last year. And just the more I dug in, the more I got more and more interested. So for example, one quote that our CEO shared that Fred had told him was, wisdom without compassion is ruthlessness, and compassion without wisdom is folly. And that really struck our CEO, and as he shared it, it really struck me too. And I was I want to get some more of that. I want some more compassion and wisdom. I want to dig in. And so I read Fred's book. Fred started to create a course, and so we started to really dig in. And there's many principles that Fred just talked about. One of them that really struck me, and I really engaged with my team, was around this notion of compassion, which before, as a business leader, I never really sat down and thought, what exactly is compassion, and how do you actually bring it to the workforce? And so we built it in my team, one of our values is leading with compassion. And for us, we've defined it as, Fred talked about walking in someone else's moccasins. For us, we talk about assume best intent in others. We're ignorant. So when there's conflict, don't jump in and say, I have the answer. It's very difficult to do. And it's not just at work. It's also in our personal lives. And I started to apply this more and more at work and also at home. And so, some of the things I've learned, by the way, in doing this is about a quarter of the time when you just approach someone and you ask them, so that didn't make sense to me, what I saw, but I want to understand what happened on your side before you make any judgments. And about a quarter of the time, you hear what the other party says, and you're like, wow, yeah, you're absolutely, I had no idea. Another half of the time, you get new information that makes it more complicated, where you go, you know what, that's a tough call, now I understand your perspective. And then we can learn together and bridge a gap. And then a quarter of the time, usually they're off. But most of the time you have, and so that's been really valuable. And so one of the things that's just beautiful is when you see our team, and you see it also in the company, of people evoking, we're leading with compassion. Hold on, let me actually find out. Because it's so easy. Fred talked a little bit about jumping in and telling people what to do and judging. And that's so easy to get into that trap. And the more you can do without that, the better your culture is, and the better, more productive you can be in your company.
Thank you. What about you, Naomi?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'm Naomi. I head the strategy and operations team for the sales effectiveness group at LinkedIn, and we basically try to support our sales organization as being effective, sales reps as being effective as possible in their jobs. And the reason that I invest in conscious business is because I guess my experience generally has been that if you do nothing else, if you invest in the culture and your team, that's like the number one thing you need to do to work well, be happy, not to sell out and to be successful. I think this probably resonates with a lot of different people who are busy and have to deliver on budget, on time, on anything that you're doing at work, which is supporting your stars on your team. When I started on my team this year in May, it was they'd been through a lot. They'd been through a lot of different managers, a lot of change, and they were a little rough and tumbled around the edges. And one of my people on the team sort of looked at me and said, good luck making a team out of this group. We're working in silos, and frankly, I'm thinking of leaving. A couple of months later, he says to me, I've never felt so supported in my role. I feel like I can really do amazing things. And in January, he launched a global sales initiative that we believe is going to have major impact across the business. It has widespread executive support from folks like Mike. And without investing in him really directly, really thinking about the value of culture and leveraging all of these principles really to make that happen, I think that he would not be on my team, and we would not be where we are right now. So that's like kind of one of the most sort of general things, but specifically, I think our team tends to be out in a world of ambiguity, building and designing and creating new things, and so that means that my team members are coming to work every day having to step out into the unknown. And when you're constantly in that state of like, oh, I've got to build a data pipeline that's never existed before. Oh, I've got to figure out how to coach people effectively with data, and that's never been done before. And every time they come to work, they're doing something new, and that's daunting, And so the desire to want to stick your head in that hole is something real and visceral that we experience every day. And so I work to support them in that with a few different mechanisms, but one, through the language and the frameworks that conscious business provide. And one of the stories, there's a beautiful story that Fred tells in one of the modules about how, like, if you lack context, people's behaviors can look kind of weird and, sort of odd. And you see this person like diving into a lake, and you're like, why would they do that? And then, you sort of pan back and you realize, oh, they're running away from a tiger. That's why they're jumping into that lake. And we talk about that on my team, that if we operate in silos, we can't see why you're jumping into the lake. So we literally work to crush those barriers, bring ourselves close together, and we use a few practices to do that, and the language and frameworks to sort of make it real. And I often say to them, like, if you didn't tell the team that basically there's a tiger on the horizon, how are we supposed to know, and how are we supposed to help you? We demonstrate through our ability to act as a team that we'll drop everything and make sure that somebody is basically saved from that tiger on a real and regular basis, so they can start to build trust that we're there for them, and that they can go out and take the risks that they need to, not get their head stuck in the hole, because it's daunting. It's daunting to be creating, and it takes a lot of confidence, and it takes a lot of courage. So I think that those are some of the ways in which conscious business has a real and direct impact on my team every day.
Cool. What about you, Yingzhao?
Hi, I'm Yingzhao. I lead a few different teams that specifically work on emerging markets, so the user experience design for LinkedIn.com and mobile applications, but more specifically for China and India. So one of the reasons I invested in conscious business is because we have that intercultural communication piece. I have teams in Bangalore, India, and the distributed teams, managing them and getting it to work is no piece of cake. So how to bridge that, right, in addition to the time and cultural habits, kinds of differences, is one of the reasons why having this kind of languaging and framework is super helpful. So we can talk about communication styles, and we can also talk about sort of the more meta level, like knower versus learner, right? Or the same cube, in space, one person sees it as red, the other person sees it as blue, and both sides may swear it's that color. But having a broader framework often brings a different kind of perspective. So I think the languaging is a huge piece. I've also done some experiential education. So we know in problem solving for teams, having invented a language to describe their problem they're going to solve dramatically increase their chance of solving a problem, right? So that's a huge part. And more so than even the specific languaging that we have from conscious business, I really love this idea of responsibility. I generally do find that LinkedIn is a very healthy place, that there's a great value of taking ownership. And there's a value of people being kind to each other. It's really a no asshole culture, which is really amazing for a company of that size. So more than sort of that being helpful to each other, I want the team to feel like they're already good people and they're working with good people, so they can have more trust in their own responsibility. I like that formation, right? Like in general, I find people really taking ownership for their work and for their own happiness at LinkedIn. So the next step is to trust their own ability to respond at every moment, to trust their own rightness, to trust that they can bring something to a situation even if they initially doesn't necessarily know what that might look like. So that really, for me, is transformational, and for my team. So over time, I just see them becoming much more resourced people. And in a couple years, some of them, especially those from a different cultural background, has really become dramatically, having a greater range in their ability to interact with one another. And in that sense, they're becoming superstars on my team and overall having greater influence, right? So I see myself, even though I have a product role, I am also in the transformation business. And through my people, they are helping to transform others. And through our platform, many millions of people. So that's some of the ways.
Thank you.
It's interesting. One of the things Fred and I speak about a lot is just the idea that in organizations, often the biggest challenges are those of a human nature and not of a technical nature, right? And so a lot of what you all are speaking to is a shared language. So whether it's leading with compassion, or people working in silos and finding sort of the common ground, or intercultural language that everyone can share. Can you maybe share briefly sort of an example of how that's come to life? Maybe Mike, we can have you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think for me, shared language is also a part of a shared culture. And prior as an entrepreneur, I never really valued as much those softer things. I was very worried about, if I talk about all these softer topics, and we could be, it's like a Dilbert cartoon. And I've come full circle that actually the best places to work a competitive advantage is really building a culture and actually talking about it incessantly. I mean, I'm talking about from the beginning of when you hire to when you onboard to how you promote. It's the whole cycle. And actually what happens is it goes exactly the other way, and it means something. So for example, take, say, leading with compassion. It's one of our values. So every time we kick off a new hiring class, we talk about it. When they're hired, when they're promoted, we talk about how that relates. And also we have awards. And so, for example, at our global sales kickoff, most global sales kickoffs will have how did we do for the year, all the numbers, how are you going to do next year? And instead, we actually go through, in the case of LinkedIn, we go through our 5 cultural tenets and our 6 values. And we tell stories about how everyone represents one of those. And what we've come to learn is that that's a competitive advantage. And so you have to reinforce it constantly. And then because you've reinforced it, it's natural. And so you'll see all the time, whether it's emails or different communication, hashtags, someone will say inside of an email, and just it naturally creates this ongoing momentum that is really, really valuable.
I'm curious, so, the culture underpinning that shared language, like anything, I imagine there are challenges, right, in implementing these in your organizations. And so I'd love to learn for our extended family here, what are some challenges that you've seen in actually implementing this shared language of conscious business within your organizations?
I'd like to say something about that.
Yeah.
Building on Mike, I mean, I've been teaching this for many years, and I'd say the Dilbert challenge is the worst anywhere, not in LinkedIn, but in any company. So for the last 20 years, I would walk into a room, not like this, but a room with normal business people, and the faces are icy cold, and I can read their minds saying, what the hell, and it's not hell, but some other worse word, are we doing here? Another bullshit thing. This is like a Dilbert cartoon, but for real. And you're just walking in. So I'd say, how do we distinguish this from a Dilbert cartoon? What's the difference? I think Dilbert is sarcastic and funny for 2 reasons. The first is because they don't believe it. They're just saying it, but not believe it. And the second is because they take it as a, holy, and they believe they are holier than thou by adhering to some principles that they don't actually implement, but they tell themselves they implement. That's what makes Dilbert very, very caustic. Well, we are trying to demystify that. This is the way we do business. Say, look, in the short term, it does look very expedient to yell at people and tell them what to do. And it is. It's true. It's expedient. It seems to work. In the long term, it kills your company because nobody wants to work there. Anybody that's smart wouldn't want to take orders without being heard. So whoever stays there is because they are so mediocre they can't leave, or they're not that smart and they're willing to follow a boss that's yelling at them. So I would tell a person, look, you like to yell at people? Only idiots will work for you. I would never work for you. And nobody that thinks would work for you. So being compassionate is not this holier-than-thou Dilbert cartoonish thing. Being compassionate is attracting the kind of talent that wants to be understood and dealt with rationally as a human being. This is not something to make fun. It's just like, look, this is the way to work. It doesn't seem as expedient as yelling at people, but yelling at people will kill you. Every drug is the same. You take the drug, it makes you feel good. Otherwise, it would never get started. When you shop with that credit card, it feels really good. When you have to pay the bill, you're sorry. When you take that cocaine, you feel like Superman. Of course, I wouldn't know that, but some friends of mine have told me that that's the case. But then you crash down and you want another fix. And it's the same with any of these 12 things I mentioned, is the same. So making it very real, very business-like, not like, oh, we're going to go to heaven by doing this, but this is the way we make money. I mean, the people in LinkedIn love working there in great part because of the culture that Mike has created. Mike's brand's a huge part of the business. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are there because of him. And I feel incredibly proud to work contributing to the people of that. So, the Dilbert challenge is a big one that I think, the three of you particularly have been able to revert by being real, because you honestly believe it, and second, by making it business relevant, not as a bullshit, cartoonish workshop leader kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to add that I feel like it's really true. You have to invest in it incessantly. I mean, it's surprising how much. And even though it feels like the long play, like it's easier to just yell at people and say, do that thing. I've got this great idea. This is what the final thing is supposed to look like. When you do that, very, very quickly, I found the team is like over here and I'm out by myself. And when I actually stop and invest and make sure that, we literally in my team, we spend a 15-minute scrum, like everybody in the team gets together, 15 people. We all talk for a minute. We share our big rocks, our roadblocks, our wins. So we're sticking close together. We're staying connected. We're trying to make sure that we understand and can collaborate, engage with each other, help each other out as we need to. But I agree, it's like a daily practice. You have to make sure that you're investing constantly. And even though I guess my experience at this point is that at any moment that I leave it behind, I actually feel the lag really quickly in the output of the team and what they're able to do.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. I love that realness. I also teach my team that these kinds of skills really help their career trajectory, right? Like so much of our professional capability is beyond our core skill set, right? Ultimately, we create our destiny, mostly with the ability to communicate and to be of influence. So luckily, I also find there's so much synergy between conscious business and design thinking. I lead a team of designers, so I teach them all to be facilitators. And if designers don't have the skills to facilitate, then they're missing so much of their ability for creative problem solving, right? And it's not only coming from them, it's really coming from the people that they work with. So how do they bring that in, right? Then they have to exemplify the ability to be real in that moment. They have to have that language to speak to the people. They have to make it safe. And to make it safe means that they have to be safe themselves. And if they can name what's happening, they're creating that safety for themselves, for other people, and situations really shift. So I do think there's a lot of risk, of course, in this kind of work, because there is a lot of default, especially culturally. Like, I'm an introvert as well. Like, I know it's not necessarily easy for me to lean in and start to offer something. And I can see my team from India, for example, and some of them from China would tend to be passive. I mean, it's so easy for them to stay that way for years in LinkedIn, even though it's a very encouraging place. So how do I get them to change that a little bit and for them to get some real-time data, and then that can shift within themselves. But I am seeing that even though there's a lot of risk in this kind of work, people get these aha moments in those meetings, in those small group conversations, in the hallway interactions, in the difficult conversations as well. So then over time, this really build up, right? Like day after day after day, and then somehow people are transformed.
Momentum.
I know we don't have much time left, but we'd love to take any questions or comments that anyone has. Please. The mic, maybe you could speak loud.
Do you have a mic, or if you ask the question, we'll repeat it.
Yes, we'll repeat it.
No,
Yes.
no, just say it. We'll
Say
repeat
the question,
it.
we'll repeat it.
Yes. Yes. The question is, it seems so simple. It's a perfect question. It's why? Why, if it's so obvious and so true, and it seems so simple, why it's so rare? Like common sense is not very common. Over 50% of the American population has a chronic disease that's behaviorally based. Now, how can that be? I'm talking about diseases that cost billions and billions of dollars, kill hundreds of thousands of people every year, and they know many years in advance that they're asking for it. But then, you see the chocolate cake or that cigarette or that drink, and all the consciousness goes out the window. And when you see the opportunity to blame someone else for your misfortune, all the theory disappears. There's something, Danny Kahneman, the only psychologist who actually won a Nobel Prize in economics, talks about the two systems, thinking fast and thinking slow. That's his book. And we have a fast system, which is very efficient, very intuitive, holistic, and it's just background. It operates in the background. And most of us rely on that system for most of our decisions. It's just that sometimes it's programmed evolutionarily, so it leads us to the wrong thing. And it takes a lot of effort to use the slow system, which is linear, it's like digital. You have to push it to say, no, I'm not going to do that, even though my impulse is to tell this person they're an idiot. I'm going to stop myself and say, why did you do that? Or what were you thinking? Or what's your intuition about this? And it's obvious, it's very simple, but behavioral change is extremely challenging and it requires a lot of discipline. So the trick here is not in the theory. It's very easy, and the only hope is to have a language that when people say, oh, this makes sense, and a logic to understand why it makes sense. But then without the leadership of people like my colleagues, it doesn't work. So there's an act of will that is the foundation of all this. It's not just because it seems right. It's a decision about how you want to live your life. And what I find in LinkedIn is that people are there to live life. They're not there to give life up.
I would say, I think it's a great question, real quick. I think a lot of it comes from either lack of information and context or differences of prioritization. So when I really dig into conflict and where there's a lot of tension, both parties don't have enough information, which gets back to you got to listen and understand before we jump to conclusions. And then the second one that happens a lot in the corporate world is that's just not a priority for them. Maybe for you, but wasn't for them, and so the system was set up that way. So those are the root causes I find a lot of times.
Take one, Matt.
What are you doing or learning, or what is the importance to have family members and other extended people from your team learn these skill sets or have a similar language so people don't go home and run into such a different kind of an environment?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'll speak from my own personal experience. I actually find it pretty important because if you think about it, we're not talking about work-life balance in a way. We're talking about integration, right, or harmony. And when we're talking about speaking a certain language, I think that language is not just isolated to work, right? So the ability for me to go home and be able to use some of that same language is important because otherwise I'm being a whole other person outside of that. And who wants to do that, right? Be someone else here and someone else there, right? We want to bring our whole self from home to work. So to me, I think it's pretty critical.
Yeah, I would echo that in a way, like you were mentioning, this stuff is so simple and it's really kind of quite natural, and it's really more who we are as people. So it actually really connects the language I use at work to the language I use at home, and it helps me to feel more like a whole person, in that transition. So I would actually say that in large part as well, it's really helped me to see myself as a person who, this is another concept in the conscious business, is like my job is not my job, It's not a job. It's a place where I go do really cool things with a lot of great people that I love to be around on any given day, and I'm able to take that same perspective home with me.
think we are at time, so thank you very much for joining us. Thank the panelists. Thank you.